this session, we're going to look more at the future, and we're going to talk about the ever-changing legal and regulatory environment. We've got some fantastic innovators on this panel for you, and I think you will enjoy hearing their stories. As before, we're going to kick off with a few questions and answers up here, but I am going to leave plenty of time for you all to get involved. So do, again, please, start thinking about any questions that you might want to bring up as we open up the conversation. And again, just a reminder that we're recording this session and we will share it on our website and our YouTube channel. So I'm going to get into it and welcome our panel. Sharing the stage with me now, you've already seen Aisling O'Connell this morning, and as I said before, Aisling within the SRA is the head of innovation policy, and some of the work we do here, it's very focused on innovation, regulatory policy, and leading the Innovate team here, and the real focus on technology helping to increase access to legal services. And then next to Aisling is Dan Long, who is a founding partner and the technology brain, I understand, behind Garfield AI. And we'll, I'm sure, talk a bit more about that firm as we get into the conversation. And Claire Street is Innovation and Digital Lead at Supertech West Midlands. And Claire supports lawtech onboarding innovation lab, amongst many other things, I understand. So we will use this session and we'll kick off with a question to all of our panelists, which hopefully will give them the opportunity to tell you a little bit more about themselves and their background, and then we will get into a bit more of the conversation. So one of the things that I really observed doing these events, and actually just day to day in meeting lots of people through the role in the SRA, is that people do come from all sorts of routes into legal tech. So I really want to just invite each of you in turn to tell us a little bit about your background and what's brought you to this point to start us off. Aisling, I'm going to start with you.
So what brought me to this point? So I'm one of those people who studied law but was never brave enough to qualify. So that's kind of how I started my professional career. And I think one of the more interesting things that I've done in my career to date has been working as a senior crime and policing analyst back in Ireland, where I very much used technology day to day in trying to identify potential suspects for crimes. And when I quickly realized that there was a lot more spreadsheet and a lot less TV kind of crime series involved in that role, I moved over here. And I would say that kind of what's brought me to tech and legal tech in particular is very much the consumer aspect of it. The kind of golden thread for me with tech and kind of in my professional career to date has been about kind of clients, consumers, and the benefits that it can bring, how it can help kind of equalize what can feel like kind of an unequal relationship at times. So I would say that kind of potential benefit that technology, AI, can bring for consumers and to legal professionals is kind of what's brought me there and brought me to the SRA in particular.
Great, Dan.
Yeah, so Dan, I don't have a legal background, so I'll try not to answer any specifically legal questions. Instead, I came from physics, and that was always sort of one foot in physics, the other in tech startups, so biotech, fintech startups, both in Cambridge, that I was involved with. but then I went back to physics. The plan was to do a PhD in physics, but then I met Philip, and the plan was just, let's build a prototype, let's see if it works, and probably you'll all guess, it's hard to leave something as just a prototype. So I did end up going off to do that PhD, but only a couple months in, I realized it wasn't sustainable to be doing daytime in the labs and night times trying to do a tech startup. So since the last sort of year and a half or so, moved back to the UK and been full-time focused on Garfield. And yeah, we're excited. Just got regulatory approval and just launched. And yeah, I'll be happy to talk about it more.
Yeah, we will certainly get into that as well. Claire?
So I think what interests most people about my career primarily is that I used to work on super yachts, a bit like on Below Deck. But that is not what brought me here today, surprisingly. So I have a background in technology, software development specifically, and I retrained into that in my late 30s. And so I've worked predominantly around small and medium enterprises that were looking to leverage technology, and I suppose the thread really throughout the rest of my career has really been about equitable access to opportunities. And so in those early days of managing technology projects, it was all about sort of ensuring that, the little people could also have technology, and that it wasn't just for the tech giants at the time. And then I've moved through my career to working across the public sector, private sector, academia. I've done a lot through skills pipeline and talent, again, removing barriers to access. And then worked with a lot of smaller companies around their tech adoption, which has really brought me to where I am today, working predominantly, with Supertech West Midlands across the professional services sector. So looking at technology across each of those industries, and really the highlights of that tech adoption, are the same story in every industry with some nuances, of course. And to date now, I am currently delivering what is very exciting, the UK's first collaborative law innovation programme. And we have 4 mid-tier firms here in the West Midlands collaborating together on their challenges, and we're about to have our showcase day next week for that event. So that innovation challenge around legal tech is sort of where I suppose my big news story here about what's brought me to legal tech today.
Yeah, that's great. We're going to get into a lot more of this, but I'm sure you'll agree we've got just a real breadth of different experiences. So I'm hoping we'll be able to draw that out. Dan, I'm going to come to you first. For those of you who haven't picked up, Garfield has been pretty big news in kind of the legal world over the last few weeks. So Dan, can you perhaps just tell us a little bit more about your firm and particularly the tech behind it, and maybe illustrate for us a little bit, how easy or not easy it's been to get that off the ground.
Yeah, so quick overview is that we act as a lawyer for a user, or also for law firms, taking them through the small claims process right up to the point of a court bundle, which then they can present themselves or hire a barrister. But that's really the product. It's something they talk to, they send their documents to it, and it generates the court forms, it sends them to the court, it handles the responses, and it guides them through the process. The reason we focused on this problem, and Philip really sort of identified this early on, is it's a closed problem space. So there's a relatively narrow set of routes that someone will enter us through and will want to go through us. And obviously, if it becomes too complicated, then we'd have to pass them on to a law firm or sort of hand them over externally. But as long as they stay within that small claims process, and specifically debt claims, then we take them through that. In terms of the technical side of it, we describe our system as an expert system tied with an augmentation of large language models. And it's quite critical because obviously people see the large language models and people talk to ChatGPT and stuff like that. But for it to work in a legal context, at least in the sort of autonomous mode that we use, it has to be tied to that expert system. So it's that expert system that defines the civil procedural rules that Garfield follows. At every stage, it identifies what they provided, what else they need to provide to continue, what their options are, what they can and can't do. And that means LLMs at no point can make decisions for the user or do actions for the user that would be inappropriate and would break court rules. So that's the sort of underlying it was sort of a lot of boring software, old-fashioned software, a lot of unit tests, all of this sort of traditional code. But what we've had to build on top of that, and this is really, this is the challenge that we had to spend a lot of time on, is how you test this kind of system. So the sort of the rules-based part, you can try to write traditional software tests, but users are going to come to our system and say all kinds of things to it and try and get it to do inappropriate things sometimes, or get it to do, maybe not for malicious reasons, but we don't want to make mistakes for them. So we've had to sort of have several different strategies for testing. So one of those is the unit test, but also we have an autonomous mode where we've had to sort of engineer a defendant as well, and it will imitate that process of working through the whole system. So often, several times a day, I'll set it running, and that triggers multiple different conversations in parallel that sometimes try to act as chaotic as possible, and then we can spot where there's any issues. The other thing I think, and we talked about this with the regulators when we were looking for regulation, is at least at the sort of initial phase, everything that goes out the door is vetted by Philip, who's a qualified solicitor and himself regulated. So no document will leave our hands that we're not satisfied with, unless we're acting for a law firm where we give them extra provisions. So we have those sort of checks. But yeah, the real sort of technical challenge in building this kind of product is really how you test this kind of product. And that's 90% of our time.
Yeah, thank you. And if I can pick up maybe with Aisling kind of some of those points. clearly AI brings many opportunities to make legal services much more accessible, potentially better for the public. But it does also come with risks. So, Aisling, can you just talk to us a little bit about the regulatory safeguards that are in place and really the role of the SRA and how you see the role of the SRA with tech firms, law firms into the future?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll take that question in two parts. I suppose some of this was touched on in the kind of earlier panel in terms of, being regulated. What does that mean kind of for consumers? And I think it's just really important to remember that Garfield law is authorized by the SRA, so it is regulated and expected to meet our standards and regulations the same as individual solicitors and other law firms that are regulated by us. And in practical terms for, kind of consumers and clients, that means that they can expect Garfield to meet those standards and regulations. It means that there is a COLP named responsible for that kind of particular firm. It means that there are safeguards for clients and consumers in the form of redress and the route to the legal ombudsman for service complaints. And it also means that kind of as part of our pre-authorization period, which kind of Daniel has alluded to, we spent a huge amount of time engaging with Garfield Law, with Daniel and with Philip to really understand the kind of business model, the tech, and kind of assure ourselves on what they were proposing and what they were doing, and that it did kind of meet our expectations and standards and regulations. And then the kind of other point that I would make is that, like all of you, Garfield Law obviously had to have a PII in place to be authorized. So I would say, the safeguards that are in place for these new and kind of innovative business models, when they do kind of apply and if they are relevant for authorization or regulation under the Legal Services Act or by SRA or indeed one of the many other legal service regulators, it's the same safeguards that consumers have when they use an individual solicitor or a high street firm. I think then the kind of second part of that question, which is really interesting and it's what really excites me, albeit does occasionally give me headaches in the middle of the night, to be honest, is kind of what's the future and kind of what's next? Because I think we are at this really interesting point as a sector where the kind of capability of technology, the capability of kind of AI, Gen I, is now at that cusp of increasingly coming into the reserved legal activity space, which is really exciting. That's exactly what we're kind of seeing, and we're seeing the real tests, I would say, of the Legal Services Act and kind of regulatory boundaries that were defined when it was assumed only people could generate kind of initial legal advice or initial outputs. I think from our perspective at SRA, we're starting very much from there is much more information and resources that we can and are starting to make available to our regulated community. We often hear it's a noisy space. There's a lot of terms that people aren't always clear on kind of what it means for them. So I think kind of first and foremost, we are enhancing the resources that we have available online. So doing things like updating the frequently asked questions to reflect the fact that we just get a lot of questions now about AI and generative AI in particular. And then we're also looking at what else can we do. So I touched upon it earlier in the presentation, but we know that our regulated community and consumers really want to know what kind of good looks like in this space, like what are the kind of best practice that is evolving in the sector already. And I would say from the engagement that my team does, we see some really great practice already. We see really responsible solicitors, law firms using the technology appropriately and recognizing that they are still accountable for the advice and for what it is they deliver to clients. So kind of putting the technology and the tools in that space. So I think from our perspective as a regulator, it's about support and how we support. And the kind of only final point I would make is that absolutely regulation has a role to play, particularly for ensuring consumer protection. But many others have a role to play as well, and I touched upon this earlier too. So, we see great practice from really responsible vendors who are so kind of collaborative with law firms and with solicitors in helping them embed the technology. Professional bodies have a hugely important role. Kind of we'll hear about initiatives like SuperTech West Midlands, and there are other initiatives like that in the region, in other regions and across the country. So there is a huge amount already happening, more to do, certainly regulation, and from our perspective, we are doing more, and we're always open to hearing what else we could potentially do, and that will be my last kind of shameless plug for the 1:30 session that we are hosting upstairs. So if you do want to come and share your experiences of tech adoption, please do.
Thank you, Ashley. And actually, I'm going to ask Claire to maybe build on that, because you obviously see the impact on the whole ecosystem here in the West Midlands. So I'm wondering if you could just talk to us a little bit about what you're seeing in SuperTech and how tech is helping drive and bring growth opportunities to the legal sector.
Regionally, we've got a great mixture of opportunities here right now. Our roadmap shows that ProfTech, so we work across all professional services, which is quite unique for a cluster body. Typically, they're usually legal tech or fintech, but we work across legal tech, fintech, insurtech, and PropTech. And our roadmap shows that we're expected to hit 1.5 billion GVA in ProfTech as a whole in the region. And so the opportunities here as a region are really exciting. Like we talked about the ingredients earlier, we have the largest concentration of law firms outside of London. We've got we spoke earlier as well about the student population. In terms of that talent pipeline and skills, we've got a really concentrated population of students as well, and one of the most diverse population of students who represent, a real depth and breadth of population. And we also have a really thriving tech sector, again, outside of London, one of the fastest growing tech sectors in the region. So we have a lot of really exciting ingredients. We have the combined authority here in the West Midlands as well, who are really backing us to supercharge that growth and ensure that we're investing in sectors that are really helping those opportunities in terms of business growth, economic growth, skills. And so what we find, though, is that like any good recipe, really, all those ingredients don't work well on their own. And as a cluster body, what we represent is a convening space, a community. People need a place to go. And what, in its simplest form, we are listening carefully to what is happening in a place-based approach, and we are bringing all those pieces together, and that is how we ensure that the activities that are happening or the growth that is happening is targeted and effective. And so by bringing together the industry partners, so we'll talk legal tech specific, the industry partners, and ensuring that they have a place to come, a lot of that peer-to-peer type stuff, that we are developing and accelerating tech startups and scale-ups, but also, connecting them with industry. We want to make sure that, the tech industry is responding to the law industry's needs and vice versa. Because there's absolutely no doubting from anybody in the room that, tech adoption is mandatory for all industries and all spaces. It is changing the way we work. We can't function without it. And so, how do we all support each other to embrace it, embed it, adopt it, and what do we need to learn from each other in doing so? And so as a cluster body, we are being that safe space to bring people together and ensure that the activity that we are creating is actually targeted to have impact and positive outcomes for everybody that's involved in that industry.
Yeah, that's great. And I mean, it's probably a question for all of you, but I'm going to come straight back to you first, Claire, just in terms of, on what you're talking about there, tech adoption being pretty, mandatory, you can't get left behind. The conversation, certainly, in doing these events over time, we're not talking about what is AI anymore. It's here, there are these opportunities. So, maybe in that specific area of bringing people together, what are the next questions? What are you, what other questions do you think the sector really needs to grapple with right now?
I think, and as someone spoke to it on the previous panel as well, is that there's a lot of scaremongering around talking about tech adoption. There's a lot of fear. There are a lot of barriers. There's a lot of jargon, and I think as well, at a lot of conferences, what you find is everyone's talking about the latest craze, the latest technologies, and that sort of FOMO that kicks in. It's like everyone else is doing it. I've had people come into me and say, what are we going to do about AI? And, I always talk about getting back to the most simple of processes, and let's not talk about the technology. I like to remove the technology from the conversation. It's what I always did in software development, because we've talked, usability is the most important thing, end users are the most important thing, outcomes are the important thing. So strip everything back always to people, processes, and then technology as an enabler, as a leverage. Who are your people, who are you serving, and what's the process that needs to happen? Technology is a byproduct, it's a tool. When you are selecting your streaming platform of where you want to listen to your music or watch your videos, you don't chat to your peers about the machine learning behind that or the AI in it. You talk about the product, you talk about what you like about it, you talk about your usability. That's what keeps you hooked in, that's what keeps you paying your monthly subscription and increasing it. And so adopt those same principles in any industry where you're using technology. Come back to those principles. You are the legal experts. What is it you need? And that's where we like, our innovation programs are so successful, is that we're bringing the two together and removing all the sales chat and the procurement processes and bringing it back to, right, as a legal firm, what is it you need? Having those authentic, transparent conversations and being able to say, I don't understand that piece or what you're talking about. Ensuring that tech companies are understanding the industry that they're serving, and that the demands that you'll have internally and externally, and what you need to, succeed. So stripping it back to the people and basic conversations, removing all the jargon. Don't say AI, exists in most of the technology that we use. And if you're not a technology, and you don't want to understand how it works, you don't need to. You need to know the usability and the outcomes.
Thank you. Ashley, maybe from your perspective, those kind of, what do you think are the burning questions or the live issues, the real life issues at the moment?
Yeah, and certainly we heard a lot from those we engage with in terms of law firms, solicitors, kind of the wider legal sector and innovators. I think we are moving, I think the kind of question from my perspective, reflecting on everything that I generally hear, aligns with what I think you were saying in terms of get specific. I think we are very much at the point now where the kind of general conversation about, okay, you know, AI, Gen AI, it's out there, it's useful. I think law firms, and in particular small-sized firms and medium-sized firms, can do more to be a confident and informed consumer when it comes to engaging with vendors and with the various products that are on the market. It is a noisy marketplace, you know. I think we all know that, and we all probably know it from our personal lives as well. If you all get the same number of kind of marketing emails to your personal email address as I do. But that is a little bit the world that we are in now in terms of 2025. And I think in kind of a day-to-day sense as a professional, where you have legal expertise, where you are trusted by clients and have their kind of confidence, I think it is a little bit about you know, what is the problem that you are trying to solve, and is a technology product or tool part of the answer to that? Because I think there is very rarely a situation where it's the full answer, because there will always be you know, challenges around integration, around adoption, and kind of usability. So I think it probably kind of much of what was said before in terms of, I think it's about getting back to basics, taking the kind of heat and noise out of the, you know, kind of focusing on all of the different product names, the terms, and really focusing on, okay, what is it that I, as a, you know, kind of sole practitioner, business owner, what is the problem here that I'm trying to solve, and what are the options to solving that? And it always strikes me kind of from my career that has kind of spanned policy and kind of working on tech projects, actually, you know, kind of start with your problem. What's the problem statement? Like that's, you know, it's true, I think, in every walk of life. And the older I get, the more I realize, oh, that really is core to core to just existing, isn't it? And I think that for me is the kind of basic but essential question that firms need to start with.
Yeah, thank you. And Dan, what do you think?
Yeah, so first of all, I'd say I fully agree. Like, you have to stay focused on exactly what you're delivering. But there is this common mantra, which maybe in the law has some sort of hesitance around it, because you do have much higher risk associated with it. But people will always want things that are faster and smoother. So if you can use tech to deliver something that's faster and smoother, then, you know, people are going to want it. So, you know, you have to sort of caveat that with managing risk. But if you take that as your focus, then you can say, well, what's a certain problem people are having, and how can we make it faster and smoother using tech? And I think, at the risk of then talking too much about the tech, there's, you know, if you're curious about what can be done, I think my impression is a lot of lawyers will use things like, you know, ChatGPT, or maybe sort of targeted products like Harvey or these other brands to produce first drafts, and then they'll see a first draft and they'll iterate on that. And that's great, but that's only sort of the tip of the iceberg into what these products can do. And I think other sectors are more exposed. So specifically in software engineering, all day I'm using Gen AI tools, and they use it in an agentic way. So these are tools that I give it quite a high-level task, and it will break down this task into multiple steps. It will think, how can I test the outcome of all of these steps? And then how can I iterate? When inevitably first try, like in any of these sort of AI-generated contracts, there's going to be issues. So how can I define, you know, the outcomes that I want in unit tests in the software engineering language? But whether you can apply that to law then is a bit tricky, because, you know, software engineering is such a rules-based sort of logical system, and the law's got sort of more qualitative aspects to it. But if you're curious about what could be done, if you're maybe interested in innovating, developing some new technology, or trying new products, maybe have a play with things that are in other fields, if you're curious.
Yeah, I think as well, it's in terms of that vendor thing, it's just about, you know, it's another relationship, and not to be scared of technologists. I mean, some of them are, you know, very unique, aren't we all? But, you know, when I need legal services, you know, I phone around, I ask my peers for recommendations, I will phone around a lot of law firms, I will talk to lots of different, and a lot of it is about a relationship match. You know, I'm not asking too many questions about their legal competence. I'm hoping that, you know, that bit's good. A lot of it is a relationship match, and it's the same with the tech company. Is rather than being sort of scared about not understanding what they're going to be talking about, you know, find your personality match, because behind those companies and services are usually somebody who has experienced that pain point themselves, which is why they've started the company, or have like amazing mad tech skills and will know how all of that works for you and can answer your questions and work alongside them to develop that relationship. Don't just like procure and think it's a plug and play. I would see any technology used that you want a good relationship with that person, because it evolves and changes and adapts fast, and you want to be assured by that relationship.
Yeah, no, great advice. So there's many other things that we could get into, but I did want to make sure that there's plenty of time to involve people in the room. As before, if you've got a question, please raise your hand and we'll get a microphone to you. So if you want to kick off at the front here, Nick, but do, have a think, and I'll come back to the room for more questions.
Firstly, thank you again. It is Dan, isn't it? Yeah. Well, after listening to you, I wish I was a student now. Because in my days, I had to go to the library, stay there all night, all day, and look through the journals in the year 1900, those days. But anyway, my question is to Aisling. You said earlier on in your presentation that you had a lot of questions asked. So can I ask you what's the common questions that are asked to you?
Yeah, I would say probably the most common question that I get asked by solicitors and law firms is, can we recommend products? Can we recommend particular kind of technologies that they can and indeed should use? And the answer is no, we can't. We can't recommend products. We regulate professionals. We don't regulate the tech products that all of you can and do use, so we can't. I would say that's a really kind of common question that we get asked. There are really useful resources out there. So for example, Lawtech UK has a Lawtech ecosystem kind of map, which is intended to kind of tell you all of the different products that exist in the law tech space. I would say that's a really kind of common question. The other kind of common question that we get asked is, what am I allowed to do? What am I allowed to do as a legal professional, as a regulated solicitor, when it comes to using kind of technology, using AI, generative AI, various kind of technology tools? And our response to that is always really, that's up to you and kind of you as a professional to make that decision as to what you use in delivering your services. What it doesn't do is remove responsibility or accountability that you have in the services that you deliver. So I would say those are two of the kind of common questions that we get asked. And then, are there any other kind of questions that we get asked? I suppose kind of what next, and what should firms be aware of in terms of what's coming kind of down the line in terms of wider regulation and kind of government position? That's certainly a question we get asked a lot. I do not have a crystal ball. I think I would be a very rich woman if I did have one, and I would not be here. But certainly the kind of indication that we have is that, for example, the current kind of legislation that underpins legal services regulation isn't changing. So this kind of model of we regulate the person and not the product isn't changing. But government are doing so much and are putting out more and more resources, both per sector and kind of cross-sector, to help the economy and people use AI. So for example, people might have seen that the Ministry of Justice recently published kind of an ethical framework that's intended to help people assess different AI tools from an ethical perspective in kind of data science and kind of software engineering use. And there will be further kind of materials being published by government in time. But there's a huge amount out there. But again, I would say, there are some really useful tools that help you navigate all of the existing resources that are out there right now, both kind of from Lawtech UK and kind of other specific resources, but also some really useful Gen AI tools can help you navigate all of the information that's out there too.
As well. I mean, I wonder actually if that's a question that it would be interesting to hear from you, Claire, on as well, just in terms of, common questions that people that you're helping come with.
Yeah, I think that's where we really see the greatest sort of success in these innovation labs, is that it creates this really, I suppose it's a bit like an incubator program really as well, and it creates this really safe space where you know, the industry partners are working with those technologists like side by side, but without that procurement process. So it's about asking those questions and really figuring out. And what we find is that these innovation programs are run and led because they are shared pain points, shared challenges, shared spaces, and actually our lawtech forum is a bit like therapy for the law firms in the region because it's shared challenges. So the common questions tend to be around a lot with the barriers to procurement and how can they be assured that it's the right thing. And again, I think it's, you know, for us, it's about giving that time and space for peer-to-peer understanding and learning on, you know, what's worked, what hasn't worked. We learn mostly from each other's mistakes, I think, and that's what we're really sharing in these spaces. And then again, with the tech companies, they're sharing their pain points about, you know, how to get in with law firms, how to sell their products, and they want to do the right thing by industry. So, you know, it's about listening to you as an industry, saying, right, what minimum requirements do I have to reach to be able to work with you? You know, is it ISO 27001? And sharing how, you know, what firm they used to get it and how they went through that process. So I think, again, it's that human element coming back to those common questions about how do I start, how do I get buy-in from, you know, everyone around me, how do I choose the right product, you know, and that fear. And, you know, from a tech background, sort of come at it like, you know, well, just try one, fail fast, you know, but that doesn't, like, work so well in the legal industry. So it's about the sort of meeting of minds as like, you know, where can we fail fast and have a go? Because, you know, if you spend 12 months talking about it and waiting for a board decision, you know, you need to have new conversations already before you've even procured the technology. So it's that education piece as well, so that everyone can sort of try and travel together at a speed where we can all get the results we're looking for of using technology, procuring technology, and what the barriers are to, you know, just cracking on and give it a go.
Thank you. There's another question here. So.
Hi, this is a question for Dan. You said that all of the output is currently checked by your partner, Philip, who's a regulated lawyer. Is the plan that will always be the case? Or as your business grows, are you know, eventually will documentation go out without being checked by a regulated lawyer? Or was that, in fact, a prerequisite for being SRA regulated?
No, so in the discussion with the SRA, the plan has always been that we'll move to a sampling-based approach as time goes on. You know, as we and they get more confident about the system and confident it works reliably. It's also going to vary depending on which documents we're talking about, because it's very different, like, you know, chaser letter before action versus, you know, reply to a defense where you're dealing with complex arguments. So we'll focus more on the more complex documents as time goes on. But yeah, the plan is to move to a sampling-based approach. And you know, we'll discuss, you know, when we feel like we're sort of all ready for that stage.
And Ashley, do you want to just comment on that as well in terms of that perspective of where the responsibility lies as well?
Yeah, exactly. So exactly as kind of Dan has said, in the conversations we've had with kind of Garfield Law, we continue to meet with them to really hear how the kind of product rollout is going. It doesn't change the basis upon which they're authorised, and that they as a firm are responsible for the outputs. So really it's about kind of the risk and kind of proportionality of that risk and those kind of processes and procedures they'll have in place in time, which, as kind of Dan has said, will scale up as the kind of product and take-up grows. But from our perspective, it doesn't change the responsibility. Whether a human reviews it or does not, responsibility still sits with the firm.
Thank you. There's another question here.
It's probably follow up on the same topic, really, but we're using any aspect of the regulatory sandbox to do what you're doing in this scenario.
Are we using which, sorry?
Your regulatory sandbox, is that still a thing?
So we don't have a regulatory sandbox. There was a sandbox that Lawtech UK was running for the legal sector, and we were part of that in the form of the Regulatory Response Unit. That still exists and kind of brings together all the legal service regulators. That offering has now changed to, I think, a pathfinding program, so that helps innovators connect with the right regulators, whether it be multiple or individual. What we do offer kind of from an SRA Innovate perspective is multiple things. So we meet and kind of can give advice as far as possible to innovators or law firms. We also have a pilot and trial offering. So we concluded our first one of those recently. And we've actually just commissioned some research to look at what else we could potentially offer to benefit the sector. So kind of thinking about would, for example, something like a safe testing environment or something kind of in that space be useful? Would it kind of generate benefits, and would there be demand for it? Because, in addition to the specific offerings we have in Innovate, we also offer things like waivers, for example, right now, waivers to our rules. So I would say kind of from an SRA perspective, there's a host of things that we offer. We see a varied uptake of all of them, and we're kind of assessing, is there more we could do to support innovation and technology, whilst also taking stock of the benefits that we've gotten from our current offering.
There's another question over here. Go ahead.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Zach from Radar. I think one of the biggest concerns or anxieties for lawyers delving into AI for the first time is hallucination. And I guess my question is directed to Dan. What has Garfield AI done to protect against such hallucinations?
Yeah, I mean, this sort of touches on the point I was saying before, where if your exposure to Gen AI is a single sort of chat interface that you get one input, one output, you're going to get an impression where, it's like anyone's first draft, there's going to be mistakes. Garfield is a whole series, we do sort of 20, 30 sometimes different API, LLM calls behind the scenes, which are doing all kinds of different updates. So it doesn't take just one, it's not like the one reasoning to the output. There's many, many stages to it. And that means that any information that's provided to us has to go into, as I say, this sort of expert system. It has to go into our schemas, has to fit those schemas, and then we can do traditional software engineering sort of logic on the information that we've extracted. And that means that, we can check sort of basic legal requirements, like, you have to be within the limitations period, you have to be a small debt claim, you have to be under £10,000, it can't be a damages claim, stuff like this. We can identify once it's sort of been piped into that more concrete traditional software engineering framework. So it's, the outside, it's a Gen AI product, but on the inside, it's a lot of sort of piping it into traditional logic and then piping it back out.
And it is something I will come to you in a moment. It is something that we hear, kind of concerns a lot of. And I just wondered whether, Claire, you can kind of share, some of those conversations or insights that you have of the concerns that come your way.
Yeah. So, I suppose we talk all the time about human in the loop. And I suppose, again, it's just about approaching this sensibly and ensuring that you are always keeping that human in the loop and checking as you go along. So in embedding and in adopting technologies, you're not going to put them in front of your highest fee paying clients to start off with, right? Where's your low hanging fruit? What are the sort of the day-to-day tasks, the processes and efficiencies that you can save time and money on first, and therefore are using AI. So, we're ticking that box. But, use that as ensure you're embedding it culturally and it's an education piece. It needs to be given time and space, so that people who are using these tools at work have the opportunity to learn from them, can be in small ways first, and that you can quickly gather that feedback about what's working and not working, so that you can work with your technologist or the relationship with your vendors to, solve those problems. So keep it small, and any of those pretty much all of the technology that you're using will have AI embedded in it. Your Microsoft platform has got AI embedded in it. So it's not necessarily that, that's the problem. Really look at them and ensure that you're giving time and space and education to all your employees, and that it's embedded across the whole organisation, so that that human in the loop knows where to watch out for those risks, or watch out for those pitfalls, or where you know that you've tested it enough that that can run and run and run. The cost of that going wrong isn't too high, or you know how to overcome it. And then progress from there as your team and your people are gaining confidence, and as an industry, we are all gaining confidence in, how we are governing this, how we are complying, what's the regulator saying, and just take it. But it needs time, space, education, and again, the humans.
Thank you both. There was a question towards the back. There we go.
It was a two-part question, really.
Mm-hmm.
Firstly was probably a question for all of you, which is, how do you see legal experts really dealing with the cybersecurity issues that will crop up with more integration? And then the second part of my question was just, how do you think that smaller firms are going to adapt to the changes in the market following that?
Shall I come to you first, Ashley? Do you want to pick up on cyber security? If we do cyber first, and then we can come back round on small firms.
Yeah, I would say what we're kind of seeing in the market in terms of cybersecurity is a huge amount of work, and obviously kind of government are, for example, actually looking specifically at this space in terms of cybersecurity and AI tools and Gen AI tools, and what kind of clearer assurance consumers can have when it comes to knowing that, okay, these products meet these minimum standards. It is, I think, a risk and a fact of our new kind of digital world that risk can never be fully removed. So I think it's about kind of assuring yourself that standards are being met, and that kind of particular providers that you're using are as safe as they possibly kind of can be, and that it aligns with the kind of risk appetite for you and your organization. So I would say it's kind of the new it's the new day-to-day risk that we all kind of have to navigate, right? I don't know about others, but you just increasingly see week on week, month on month, these really big companies who have experienced huge cyber attacks that have impacted their operations for months. And if it can kind of happen at that level, that is the world that we live in now. So it really is just about what you as kind of a business can do, and what is out there in terms of trusted information and kind of quality marks to assure you that those products are safe and have taken the steps that you need and expect them to take as a vendor that you will have a relationship with.
Yeah. And Dan, your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I think the way you framed it was correct, that it's an existing risk, but it's one that's sort of amplified by greater integration. So there's all the traditional sort of software engineering answers around sort of, clearly isolating your data and putting the right rules in place so that only certain users can access certain things, and all the sort of standard answers there. I guess the sort of more big picture question is, like, long term, will sort of open source foundational models keep up to scratch with closed source models? And if that isn't the case, then inevitably there are going to be relatively few companies, and potentially not all of them based, in England and Wales or in the UK, that are going to be providing, a foundational model that no one else can keep up with. I think it's an open question if there'll be closed source models or open source models that can keep up, and then you can, host them yourselves, and you can take that security into your own hands. But otherwise, there will be definitely some, expectation and reliance on these big tech companies to employ the sort of, proper rules and actually follow them, and then be caught out by the regulators when they do break those rules.
Mm. And Claire, I mean, maybe you can pick up any of that, but also maybe move us into, well, how well set do you think small firms are at the moment to deal with some of the threats?
And that's where it can feel more challenging, right? And again, it's that noisy, scary space, and it's like cybersecurity, and a lot of the big headlines are, hackers and what have you. And in fact, our next FinTech Regulation Innovation Lab is on operational resilience. And so, again, I do think the collaboration piece here is really great for smaller firms, and that's, again, what we see in creating a convening space, is that, learning from your peers, like, again, it was talked about this morning, and maybe coming together in terms of helping each other understand, you know, what are our minimum requirements here? What should we be look at? You know, learn from others' mistakes. What, you know, where have you been caught out? And, you know, perhaps there's a collaboration piece there in terms of procurement, in terms of like helping each other with that resource and education piece about how to procure that, what you need to be looking out for, what you can do as a firm. Because actually what we do find as well is that, you know, we know that the big tech companies aren't, they're not safe from these risks either. And actually sometimes what we find is that the smaller companies and the smaller tech companies have a better opportunity here because they're more able to oversee all of the operations and think about all of the integrations and know who is working in all of the departments. You know, a lot of the big retail banks I work with, you know, I know more about some of their interdepartmental stuff than some of the people working there, you know. So there is that opportunity to be able to actually really embed very safe practices and see them working alongside each other. So it can be an opportunity too, being smaller.
Yeah. Did you want to add to that?
I think I was just picking up on that point, I suppose, of the value of being smaller in size. That's something that kind of has come through in engagements we have and in the research, in that there is the ability for smaller firms to be more agile and actually kind of to respond to risks in real time and in live time, because they don't have the same, I suppose, kind of structures to navigate internally. And then I was just going to say, you know, in terms of what firms can do to navigate or to kind of equip themselves for the future, there have been really kind of great initiatives to roll out, you know, things like Cyber Essentials training kind of freely to businesses. And there's just, I would also kind of point to the fact that as part of our annual compliance conference, we always run a session on cyber, on kind of cybersecurity and cyber risks. So there's some really good resources on our own website as well, the SRA, and kind of good sessions where you can look back and hear from experts kind of pitching in exactly this space as well.
Yeah, that's great. We are coming to the close of this session. Are there any other questions that anyone wants to raise?
Hi there, Matt Pennington from Shakespeare Martineau. It was a question really for the regulator. Do you envisage a future whereby you're asked to regulate sort of agentic systems directly, who are regulated to give advice in the same way at the moment you're allowing solicitors to do?
It's a good question, which I'm going to pass that on.
Thanks, Aileen. Do I envisage a future personally? Yes, I think that future is absolutely tangible. That could exist. I don't think we're there yet. And I think some of that, I suppose, comes down to what is possible and permissible within our existing kind of regulatory framework. And I think things such as authorising Garfield law shows that actually there is flexibility in our kind of mix of activity-based and title-based regulatory framework that allows us to do some of this already. I think helpfully, we have ongoing conversations both with our oversight regulator as well as with government, where we do kind of highlight the grey areas or the boundaries. So in short, I would say, yes, I think that's absolutely possible. We have kind of routes of communication open where we highlight exactly these areas where we think kind of change may be needed. But I would say that there is a lot kind of capable and that we are doing right now within our existing framework.
Yeah, and I would echo that just in terms of, you know, the legal regulation is interestingly unique amongst other regulation areas, and I think you know, there's always got to be some evolution, and what we have at the moment in terms of, you know, I think quite a strong principle-based approach, but focused on individuals and firms, that, you know, as regulator, that is the environment we're in. You know, we have that statutory underpinning, so it's not for us to, you know, adjust that per se, but there's quite a lot of flexibility within it. And then, yes, into the future, I think that question of, you know, regulators, you know, the landscape within legal services for regulation and overlapping with other areas of professions regulation, I think there are live questions into the future. For now, in addition to thanking you all, can you please join me in thanking our panelists? Thank you very much. Thank you.